All's well now. People are still joining, and I am the host. But really delighted to have you on this webinar. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of people joining this. And for those who don't know, my name is Ali Khwaja. I'm the chairman of KTrade. And as I was saying, that I'm really delighted to have Waleed on this webinar with us. And there are three main reasons. The first is that I think he's by far the best investor I've come across, certainly in Pakistan, but I think also globally. And although he moved his head in denial, but I think his
You've
performance,
really been doing a marketing job on
his
me.
performance, which I'm aware of, shows that. But secondly, also that he's a shareholder and a supporter of KTrade, and thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, also that this is the third generation relationship between the Saigol Group and KSB. Waleed's grandfather's brother, Gul Saigol, was a supporter, customer, friend of KSB. And as a group, we really cherish that because it epitomizes the values which we hold, that having multi-generation relationship with our customers, and especially with Saigol Group. I went to LUMS, and I have very fond memories of spending a lot of time at Saigol Auditorium, which was generously donated by Waleed's father. So Waleed, with that,
Ali, thank you. I just want to just before we start, thank you for the very kind words. I think that you've been very generous in your compliments over the last week or so since we decided to, and you are generally also, but in the last week, you've really been very, very kind with your introduction and with your comments. So I'm grateful. I'll try and it's going to be very difficult, but I'll try and live up to what you've sold. And as we go through this discussion, I'd also like to sort of reiterate what you said about the values between our respective groups. It's as you know, a association which predates us by many decades, and it's been a very fond relationship on both sides, where we've all seen many ups and downs, but as sort of individual groups, but we've managed to maintain our friendship and our relationship, and long may that continue.
Thank you so much for those kind words, and nothing which I said was in any way an exaggeration, or the difficult thing. But I will pose you more difficult questions in this conversation.
Sure.
So, Waleed, over the last 5 years, it has been tough for Pakistan. It has been tough in terms of the economy, and perhaps that has fed to challenges which have been political, emotional, psychological. And these challenges have deterred other people from investing in stocks. It has forced some people to even move out of Pakistan, and it has certainly prevented people from looking at Pakistani stocks. But in this time period, you have been very successful in investing, even during times which for most people seem very turbulent. So, Waleed, why have you invested in such times? And secondly, why should anybody else invest in Pakistan?
I think, Ali, there's one is a technical reason and one is an opportunistic reason, right? I think the technical reason is this, that I probably like almost 100% of my wealth and my family's wealth is in Pakistan. And it is we don't really have any option. So our fate is intertwined with that of the countries, right? So we never had the option of packing our bags and getting up and moving. Even if we did, what would we do, right? We've run businesses. This is what we do for generations. We've seen many ups and downs in the country, from the whole formation of Bangladesh to the nuclear tests to this latest crisis. I mean, it's a history that's that is sort of seen this happen time and again. And there were some members of the Saigol family initially, after the nationalization of Bhutto, that decided to walk away and go and try their fortunes elsewhere. And actually, they didn't do well at all. And in the vast majority, and almost in every case, they ended up losing whatever capital that they had. And the ones that remained successful are those that remained in Pakistan. So as a family, at least our group is very, very much committed to remaining in the country and sort of betting on the country. That has always been the case. So, so even though the let's say if the technical sort of impediment wasn't there and we were able to take our capital and move elsewhere, the chances of that happening is negligible, probably zero. And as a family, obviously, when things go tough, we, like most people, have had discussions. And unequivocally, I can tell you that this clear sort of every single person on our board was of the same view that we are committed and we are committed for the long haul. So when you have that sort of clarity as far as your strategy is concerned, it was an easy decision for us to make. Because the problem would have been, God forbid, the incorrect predictions that people had made, had those come true, then our problem would have been so much bigger than just our investments in the PSX, that we felt that it was a bet worth taking for us. So that's why we did it.
That's very wise. That's very wise and insightful. That you need to have that commitment, and I suppose that once you have that,
I think more than the commitment, Ali, we had a clarity. We have a clarity of purpose that we are 1000% committed to our businesses within Pakistan and to the country at large. Like, we don't have any desire to move our assets out, and this clarity allowed us to be brave. So if I had this clarity and I see things trading at a marginal, at a fraction of the value that they're worth, it's a very easy decision to make, because there is no concept of opportunity cost of investing this money elsewhere. So it was very clear for us.
Elaborate a bit on the investments which you have done, not just on the portfolio side, but also on a group level. And then I'm aware of them, but would be, I think, for some of the people in the group, it would be interesting to know, as a group, where have you invested your capital? I know you've expanded your cement capacity. You have recently done something in healthcare, but would love to hear from you.
So I think that, look, apart from the capital markets, I think in Pakistan, everybody knows where everyone's invested. So obviously we have this fairly large exposure to the capital markets, and we can talk about that later. But I think we've invested heavily in textiles. So we've invested in weaving, we've invested in spinning, we've invested a lot on the energy side. I think just our group's captive capacity as far as solar power is concerned is almost 50 megawatts now. We want to have a maximization of that solar capacity that we've invested in. We invested, as you mentioned, we invested in the grey cement business. We put up a new line as far as grey is concerned. We've invested heavily on the fuel side of the business and trying to make it more fuel efficient, and going towards alternative fuels which are locally available and getting off this reliance on international coal. So that's something that we've heavily invested on. That's like more, the capex is more on know-how and collection centers and things like that. So that's something that we've done. We've launched this white cement product, this HT Putty, which they have all these big ad campaign that was going on. So we've invested in that. And then we decided as a group that healthcare is something that we've been looking at since 2020, actually. And we've actually done a lot of work on it, and we've spent a lot of time. It was something that we thought about maybe 10 years ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago. And yeah, 10 years ago, I'd say 2010 is something that we looked at then. But we felt that we didn't have the know-how to execute it, right? And this time we've done it in a completely different way. So we've got Imperial College as from the UK as an affiliate partner. We have a gentleman who's the CEO, who used to be the CEO of Aga Khan Hospital. He ran Aga Khan, very, very well, sort of world-renowned sort of personality in the healthcare business. And we've brought together a team of professionals, plus a technical partner that is going to allow us that's going to mitigate the risks as far as putting this whole thing together. So healthcare is a big play for us. And this is something that hopefully we'll get off the ground in 2026, at the end of 2026, where we hope that we'll open the doors for NovaCare. And then I believe that there's a lot of opportunity as far as the whole privatization process is concerned. And as a group, we'll be looking at that very, very seriously.
And of course, jump very deep on the capital side, capital market side, and discuss your investments. But before that, you've mentioned textiles. Within textiles, you mentioned almost all the parts of the value chain. You mentioned energy within that, and then within cements, you mentioned a couple of new products, and then a new vertical altogether of healthcare. But generally, when we speak to industrialists, most of them complain that things are really bad and challenging, and generally, like the atmosphere, the sound bites at least, which comes at least on social media, um, seems to suggest that sometimes that the heavens are falling. How challenging are things? And I'm sure you face the same challenges. How come you are more optimistic than they are? What's the secret sauce here? What is there a
I
secret
think
sauce?
I think partially it helps that I spend a lot of time abroad. I think it helps a lot. So I'm not really involved in the day-to-day political sort of slinging matches that go on in the country, right? And people are like really, really committed to one side or the other, right? That's like, and that channels into their investment decisions. So as investors, I think the most important thing as investors is to have like a level of self-discipline and a level of it's a psychological challenge, right? And I think that the problem, what's happened in Pakistan in the last sort of 3 years, is this, that because of political polarization that has come into people's investment decisions, right? And I think that's really, really clouded things. I remember there's a WhatsApp group of one of your rivals, and I used to write in that about the capital markets and about the Pakistani bond and about Pakistan. There was no question in my mind that Pakistan was going to default and all the rest. बस मुझे मेरा मतलब है गालियां नहीं दी लोगों ने, बट बाकी तो सब कुछ मुझे मुझे कह दिया, और मुझे काफी लोग काफी बातें सुनाते थे in the last 2-3 years where I took a very strong position on the economic side, but my focus has always been more on the economic side, and I think that that's the key, right? You have to look at the numbers, you have to look at the hard cold facts, and then take a view on the facts as opposed to which side is saying and kaun kya keh raha hai. Or there's been a lot of lies in Pakistan. There's been a lot of propaganda on Pakistan. I am on social media. I tweet every now and then, but I look at Twitter to actually just see कि लोग कितने पागल हो चुके हैं, frankly. And if you look at Twitter, like one would think कि पता नहीं क्या हो गया. And I'm not saying that the things have not been challenging. Things have been incredibly challenging. And we were on the brink of something very, very bad, potentially, right? And possibly people are going to leave this call by what my next sentence is going to be. But the PDM government did a remarkably good job in a very, very difficult period, and in order to prevent that default. And you have to understand something, that politicians do not take decisions like CEOs. They have to mix the economic side with the political side. And they burned through this whole deal of political capital to get this situation from not defaulting, right? And at the end of the day, Pakistan didn't default. That is the reality. And Pakistan is not going to default anytime soon. That's the reality. Now, whether people like PDM or the other side or they don't, this is irrelevant. Because as people on this call, we are investment professionals and we are business people, right? And we have to take a business and an investment call. And that was the call that I was able to take. I'm not going to sort of for a moment suggest that things were not challenging. Things were incredibly difficult. They were incredibly challenging, but we got through that challenge. And as the days went by, our position was improving. We've had this 650 odd million surplus the other day. We were blowing $2.5 billion a month. Let's not forget where we started from, right? And that's the reality. And we have to focus on the reality, not on whether this finance minister is good or that finance minister is good or this PM is good or that PM is good. We as investment professionals have to look at numbers. And anytime there's this number that people keep quoting, oh, 30 billion का shortfall है, 30 billion तो पाकिस्तान को, 30 billion का shortfall कभी भी नहीं था. Net financing का number देखना था. You have to look at कि how much are your lenders engaged with you, कौन सा rollover हो सकता है, क्या नहीं rollover हो सकता है, कौन सा cash flow manage करेंगे ये imports को रोक के. It has been a very, very arduous and a very difficult task that the government has successfully managed. First PDM and then the caretakers. And they have to be people. We shouldn't belittle the task that they've completed, and so my view was pretty clear on that. I thought that despite the challenges, I think that if you looked at things rationally and in a fair and objective manner, तो conclusion यही थी. आपको याद है हमने लंदन में वो आपने राउंड टेबल की थी, और उसमें आपको याद है कुछ हजरात ने क्या वहाँ पे किस किस्म की वहाँ पे बातें हुई थी, आपको याद है? I don't want to say anything on that. And if you recall, even then I was the one guy there that was going on and on that they're not going to default. And also, we have to bear in mind something, that the rules, Pakistan is a member of the most exclusive club in the world, which is the nuclear club. Okay. And nuclear powers have different rules. That's a fact. That's a fact of life, whether we like it or not. And no one is going to see a nuclear country implode for $3 or $4 billion. It's not going to happen. It is impossible. When Russia defaulted, क्या हुआ था? सब कुछ restructure हो गया था, default हो गया था, everyone went out of its way to try and make sure that Russia gets out of that situation, right? And then the economy turned around. But there was another thing that happened before that, is when the Soviet Union collapsed. And what happened? There were nukes all over the Soviet Union. And the Americans got involved in trying to disarm those countries and incentivize those countries, because nobody wants a country with nuclear weapons to be. Pakistan is not Sri Lanka. And the Sri Lankan comparison used to really annoy me when people used to give me this. देखे ना, Sri Lanka में default हो गया. Sri Lanka और पाकिस्तान के लिए same rules नहीं apply करते. किसी ने पाकिस्तान को $3-4 बिलियन के पीछे default नहीं करवाने, नहीं होने देना था. और श्रीलंका ने default किया, और क्या हुआ? अब जाके उनकी, मेरा ख्याल है अब जाके पता नहीं कोई लोकल डेट शायद अभी restructure हो गई है या नहीं हुई. So all these people that were saying that Pakistan should default, we should restructure our debt. If we had restructured our debt, our local debt, we would have been in a banking crisis in Pakistan. And आपके mid-size banks खत्म हो जाते, because उन्होंने सब में उनका, आप सब का IDR निकाल के देखें, 70% पे IDR है. उसके ऊपर जब इनको राइट डाउन्स लेने पड़ने थे, तो कहाँ से कैपिटल आना? तो ये जो एक अहमकाना thesis यहाँ पे project किया गया है in the last, and I'm getting quite emotional talking about it, because it infuriates me that people actually not only propagated this thesis, but they bought it and then they sold it and then they acted upon it. So all those people जिन्होंने $350 के अंदर डॉलर ले के हुंडी हवाले से भेजे थे पाकिस्तान से, उनसे पूछे ना आज कि who's smarter now, you know?
No, absolutely. I think I'm reading a book called Psychology of Money, which touches on some of the points which you mentioned, that psychological biases are real, and not just real, perhaps they are the dominant factor which affect all of our investment decisions globally. This is not just true for Pakistan. So perhaps we underestimate the role which psychology has to play in our investment decisions. And
I think that's the greatest challenge of investors. It is the greatest challenge of an investor, is to have the psychological clarity to do what they need. And maybe I had a bias on the other side. Maybe my bias was on the other side, because I was so infuriated by the things that were being said. And I kept saying to people कि यार मुल्कों की बैलेंस शीटों में और कंपनियों की बैलेंस शीटों में बहुत फर्क होता है. मुल्कों के लिए $2-4 बिलियन आगे पीछे करना it's possible. You cannot look at Pakistan's balance sheet like you look at the balance sheet of Maple Leaf Cement, for example, and say कि ओहो इसमें तो इतना shortfall है, ये default हो जाएगा, banks foreclose कर देंगे और ये खत्म हो जाएगा. ऐसे नहीं हो सकता. So I think that was the.
And when I said that, I regard you as one of the best investors I've come across, and I think one of that quality which I've noticed is your ability to see through the noise, both positive as well as negative. And then there have been a lot of positive bubbles where I've seen you be more critical about it. So I certainly, give credit to you for that. And perhaps, you're right, perhaps being outside of Pakistan, outside of that noise does allow.
It helps a lot, because I don't spend my evenings discussing this, right? I don't spend my evenings with friends and family talking about this like constantly.
Yeah, so political news affects our ability to make proper or political biases, whichever way they might be, affect us. Now, Waleed, moving to stock investing, what's your outlook for the next 12 months, 3 years? Are you positive, negative? Do you think it's a good time to buy, bad time to buy? And then after that, would love to hear your views on which sectors do you like, and then perhaps if you can.
I did a tweet like in December of 2022, right, where I was like talking about like dirt cheap valuations and people should invest in the markets. And then I did a tweet the other day about like the return of the PSX. And I don't reply to tweets because I don't really like to fight on social media. I think it's like I fight in WhatsApp groups. I don't fight on Twitter. Okay. So someone had written a tweet in this, they wrote that, oh, something very like sarcastic, that, oh, you thought like cement was dirt cheap and now you're hiding behind any hospital investment, something like that, something along those lines. Right? And you sent a chart in your WhatsApp group about cement valuations. And have you seen that chart? I mean, it's our valuations of cement companies are like where they were in 99, $25, $30 a ton. It's crazy. If when I look at it, it looks crazy to me. It looks like a really obvious kind of thing, right? So I feel that as far as like, I'm just using cement as an example. I think this holds true for everything. And if you look at the market, you look at how companies have performed. I mean, you have like established companies that are listed that offer liquidity, and they're giving you like 100% return, in like over 100% return in certain cases, right? So I think overall the market is incredibly cheap. I think that I don't know what the total market cap of the PSX is. It must be 30, 35, 30, anywhere between 30 to 35 billion dollars, somewhere along those lines. We still have almost $100 billion to catch up to the day when, I don't want to take a political position, but I have to say it, when Nawaz Sharif was removed, right? And I'm not taking a political position, right? So I think Nawaz Sharif, when that happened and we were on that, in that, वो क्या था उस वक्त, वो EM मार्केट में हम जा रहे थे और वो सारा कुछ हो रहा था, फ्रंटियर से EM में गए थे ना, तो उस वक्त जो मार्केट कैप थी मार्केट की, मेरा ख्याल है 124 या 127 बिलियन ऐसे करके कुछ थी। तो मुझे याद है कि उस वक्त मेपल लीफ की डेट आज से ज्यादा थी, कैपेसिटी आज से आधी थी, और मार्केट कैप थी मेरा ख्याल है 4 गुना या 3 गुना टू व्हाट इट इज टुडे। So I'm just using that as an example. I still think that in order to get to where we were, we have about 80 to 90 billion dollars of market cap to catch up. But that's nothing, right? That's still nothing, because we have a $350 billion GDP and we have a market cap which is like a tenth of that. And I'm in Lahore, and there's a place to the east of us where the GDP is 4 trillion and the market cap is over 4 trillion, right? So what should the aspiration be? The aspiration should be to get this market cap to a level where it's, okay, like not 100% of GDP. Why can't it be 50% of GDP? Why can't it be 30% of GDP? Why does it have to be 10%? Right? Not even 10%. I think it's like 8%. So I think that as far as like the upper limit is concerned, I mean, if we get our house in order, the upper limit is like insane. And that goes across sectors.
So just catching up with the previous long-term valuation levels, which are 6 or 7 times earnings, means doubling from here, adjusting for inflation.
So you see, you first have to catch up to where you were.
Yes.
Then you have to catch up to where others are.
Yes. Right. Yes. So as you said, like first leg, just catch up where you were. That's a 2x. Yeah. You catch up to where you adjust for inflation. That's probably another 3x. And then you catch up for the difference between us and India, or us and other emerging markets. And then
don't catch up. Aadha to kar lo
the gap, catch up on the gap difference with India. So Willie, that's a strong overall bull case for Pakistan. But do you see that playing out over the next 12 months? Do you think that things are getting incrementally getting better? And do you think we have catalysts which can continue the rally and the momentum which we have seen in the market?
I think 12 months is like a really short period. I don't think 12 months. And I think this is also like a fundamentally one of the issues that, I get people calling me up, yaar, ko tip de dein. Ko acha stock bata dein. Then I tell them, and like, okay, I think this sector is nice. I don't like telling people stocks because it's not. Because then when they lose, they make money, they don't call you. When they lose money, they call you and say कि तुमने loss करा दिया. So I tell them, यार ये sector देख लो, ये अच्छा है ये वो. तो but timing, यार, I don't know. And then people ask me कब तक, ये कब तक होगा? And I'm like, यार भाई मुझे नहीं पता कब तक होगा. So I think that putting a time limit on things is really difficult, and I think that's part of the psychology of investing. That people view the stock market as like betting on red or black, right? Oh, I bet on this stock. It should be up like 50x in like 50% in like 3 months, and then the market is good. And if it's not, the market is bad, I'm never going to do this. I'm going to invest in property instead, right? So stock markets are places for long-term capital growth. Maple Leaf Capital has been around for 10 years, and we have been through the worst period in Pakistan's capital markets in the last 10 years. Like some of really bad times. We've seen obviously some good times in the first 2-3 years, and then we've seen some abysmal times, okay, like the worst ever. And we have still made a very good return as far as our original capital is concerned, right? And we've exponentially grown the capital, right? Because we look at the stock market as a place for long-term capital growth. That's how I look at it. I do not look at it as give me a tip and I'll double my money in 3 months and go and buy a car. Like, that's not how I look at the capital market. And I think this is a big problem in Pakistan, right? And if you look at like the US market, so you look at India, it's amazing. It's amazing. Like now, I spend a lot of time in London, as you know. There's a lot of Indians in London, right? And there's a lot of Indians from India that live in London. And one meets them and यार उनके जो घरों के staff members हैं वो भी अपने savings stock market में डालते हैं. It's amazing. It's an incredible thing to see, right? That people have so much faith in the Indian economy and the Indian markets, and this is a job of sort of like investor education that people like you have to do, really, and the regulator. They have to explain to people that यार ये ऐसी चीज नहीं है जिसमें 10 रुपए डाल ली, 10 रुपए की चीज भी वो 6 महीने में 100 रुपए की बेच दी और चले गए. You don't want that. You want कि यार 10 रुपए की चीज खरीदी, वो 5 साल बाद 250 रुपए की या 150 रुपए की. Where you're getting long-term capital growth, and there are some fantastic businesses like this in Pakistan जिन्होंने amazing returns दिए हैं over the years, और वो returns bank rate और inflation और उनसे बहुत ज्यादा हैं, ठीक है ना? तो मेरा ख्याल है कि this is not a 12-month leg, this is a more long-term leg. Now you asked about catalysts, right? यार catalysts, I think that सबसे बड़ा catalyst जो है वो ये है that necessity is I always say this, necessity is like the mother of invention, right? So I think that that's like a big thing, and we just don't have any room to mess around with the balance sheet of the country anymore, right? So I think that reform is going to be forced through by the powers that be. And I think the second thing is this, that we have a number of international partners, a few countries and institutions, and they will support Pakistan. And I have also met with some of them, and they have said that we will support you to the nth degree in trying to reform your economy, but we are not going to pay your circular debt for you. We're not going to. So Pakistan has to take a step forward, and they'll take two steps forward with us. ये नहीं होगा कि हम business as usual, हमें डॉलर दे दो क्योंकि हम frontline state है, because ना कोई frontline war है और ना किसी को frontline state की जरूरत है. They want, as I'm saying, they also want a long-term relationship for long-term growth as far as Pakistan is concerned, right? There's going to be no bailouts like that. No one's coming and paying our rent for us. That's not. And I think that the powers that be realize this, right? I think they realize this. So
there are three points from what you said, which I want to follow up on. The first is that a lot of the people on this call are people who are similar to you. They have big family businesses in Pakistan. You invest in stocks, and you mentioned that you have gotten a great return over the last 10 years, despite some horrible times during this time period for the overall economy. And I don't want to probe you more for the return because you chose not to mention the number, but would love to. Can you give us a sense of, do you think that that return was better than had you invested in, let's say, real estate, B dollars, C gold, D startups? How would you? And are you happy with the asset allocation, and how much of your portfolio is in stocks versus the other assets which we spoke about?
Startups से तो बेहतर ही होगी probably, क्योंकि startups में तो काफी चीजें have not really panned out as one would have hoped. But look, I don't invest in real estate. Real estate is a great asset class as far as Pakistan is concerned. Whether it will remain as great as it has done in the last 15, 20 years, I don't know. Because again, it's now being taxed in a more equitable manner, and I think that DC rates ke changes, and it used to be like a legalized laundry, right? You have 100 rupees which is out of books, and you want to clean it, and you just put in real estate, or 80% off, okay, aapko mil jata hai, right? So I think that's ending. So I think that the real estate, it'll always be a good asset class because it's a large population with very large housing needs and all the rest of it. So I think that it'll always be a good asset class. Whether it'll be as incredibly lucrative as it has been in the last 20 years, I don't know. I can't say. I'm not a real estate investor. I don't really invest in it. So
do you regret? Why is that? And do you regret not investing in real estate?
No, I don't regret. No, I don't regret, because I don't have the mental makeup to go and build a society. I can't do it. I'm not. It doesn't intellectually. It doesn't really do anything for me. I think finding good companies and testing myself as to how good or bad I am, I think that's like a little bit more interesting for me. And I think that investing in the stock market has allowed me to have a really, really great macro view on Pakistan, which I never had. I used to run a textile business before. I had no idea कि मुल्क में क्या हो रहा है, और अपनी industry का मुझे पता था, but other than that मुझे नहीं पता था. Now even the new avenues that I look at, like I think I feel like I have a pretty decent understanding of the Pakistani economy, which I didn't have for the first sort of, I don't know, 10 years of my business career. So I think that, but as far as returns go, I think that, I don't know, I think people probably made more money in real estate because it's been like a really, really big bull cycle as far as real estate is concerned. Especially for people that went out and bought sort of virgin land and developed it and developed a housing colony and that sort of thing. So I think, yeah, they probably did really, really well. But I think that the returns in the market have, as far as like going and buying plots in DHA and stuff like that, I think it's probably comparable. It's certainly better than gold, because gold is, in dollar terms, has doubled. What is it?
No, up 20%.
I remember.
Yeah.
Dollar
terms, so when it goes up by like 5-6%. So rupee terms has been...
but देखो ना, मुझे याद है उस वक्त 10 साल पहले गोल्ड का क्या रेट था, 1200-1400 रेट था. अब it's what, 2400 or something like that. But वहाँ पे gold में, when you invest in gold in Pakistan, you're actually, and I used to do that also, right? I used to do a lot of this trade where I used to buy gold, buy physical gold, and then short physical gold, and then I had a rupee exposure only, right? And I think that's what, I think the vast money in that has been made on the devaluation. I think that's the big gain has been as far as devaluation is concerned. But I think that the market returns have been, if you had invested sensibly, and we've had, mind you, in this 10 years, we've had one like really bad year, which was this transition from Imran Khan to PDM, because I'd never thought that we would start subsidizing oil and power to the extent that we did. And I never thought that we'd mess around with the IMF program the way that we did. So that was a really bad year for us. We were fortunate enough that we had enough liquidity to hold all our positions. And then the next year we did quite well. And then this year. But if you take out, if that hadn't happened, फिर तो हमारे returns बहुत ज़्यादा high compared to other asset classes. But I think even now, I think that they are probably better than most, barring real estate. I think like real estate.
The last question from my side, we will open up to questions from audience, and please, you can write the question on chat and I'll read it. Waleed, what are your top? You gave us a warning that don't ask me about individual stocks, so I'll take that hint which you mentioned. But still, where should we invest? Which sectors do you like? And I'm sure other people will want to go deeper into where should we invest in
आजकल तो बड़ी सख्ती है यार SECP की, मुझे तो ऐसे ही डर लगता है बात करने पे कोई भी. But anyway, look, I think that there are obvious things. I think there are obvious sectors that are trading at a fraction of their historic sort of valuations, right? I think those are like really easy. So cement being one of them is like a really easy kind of. Steel being another one. These cyclicals, right? They're highly cyclical sectors. They are trading like at a fraction of where they were trading like 3-4 years ago. So I think that's like an easy thing. I think the other thing that's really interesting for me is sectors that require government reform. So I think reform is now imperative, and I think reform is happening and will happen and will continue to happen. And I think that with the SIFC and all of this stuff, the ability for political decisions vis-a-vis the economy is out. I think the SIFC won't allow that, and our international countries that are our partners and institutions that are our partners are not going to allow that. So anything where reform is going to be forced through, those are interesting sectors for me to look at, right? So things that relate to like circular debt or deregulation and things like that. I think those are sorts of things that we should also look at.
Very interesting. You're saying that go for the distressed companies, like play the cyclical games, not cyclical gain companies or sectors, and don't go. Essentially, you're saying don't go for the tech and the more stable companies right now.
No, I think you'll make money in both, right? I don't think that I think you'll make money in. I think that like you've talked about tech, you'll make money in banks. I mean, but where are you going to make exponential returns, right? Exponential returns are things where there's going to be a paradigm shift. So all these like circular debt related stuff, there has to be a paradigm shift. Right? The whole everything has to change. If things don't, we have a 3.2 trillion rupee gas circular debt. क्या ये accumulate हो सकता है दोबारा? मेरा तो नहीं ख्याल है हो सकता. तो फिर ये गैस कंपनीज और ये OGDCs of the world और ये जो सारी कंपनियां हैं, ये क्या ऐसी ट्रेड करती रहेंगी? So,
I see the framework which you're applying. Like essentially, you started the conversation by saying, necessity solves the problems, and essentially you said, clarity of long-term investing. So essentially, your view from what I hear is that things will improve because they have to, and hence the stocks which are pricing that things will never improve are the good places to buy.
Yeah, so you see that if you look at the Pakistani bond, right, that's like a preemptive indicator of all of this, right? Right. So why did the bond go from 38 cents at a low, and why did it go to 100%, right? So the point is this, and it comes back to an earlier point that I made, right? That nuclear powers have different. It's just different, man. Like it's just whether you like it or not. The world is not a fair place. And unfortunately, when Ghana defaults and when Pakistan defaults, it's like a very different situation, right? It's 250 million people. That's life, It's the lottery of birth or whatever, right? And that's what it is. So I think that, and I think that look, did India in 1991, India had been run in a certain way. तो उनको क्या हुआ था? वो एक दिन क्या जागे थे, उन्होंने कहा था, oh, you know what, we've decided that now we want to change our ways? Of course not. There was no lifeline. And when there's no lifeline, you have to change. I have been through this in Maple Leaf Cement. I've been through this 14, 15 years ago. We ran things in a certain way. And then we were on the brink. And then we had to change. And if we didn't change, we would have lost it. So Pakistan is at that point where nobody's right. You go to Saudi and you meet a lot more you have a lot of really smart friends that live in the West and look at all of this stuff and are involved in stuff. And I've had the pleasure of meeting a few of them through you, right? What do they say? They say, yes, we're going to be tough. We'll help, but we'll be tough. And there is nothing, when I started my career, there was I used to run a textile mill, and I had like two very tough banks. They had very tough executives that used to deal with me, right? Just in the day to day, like life was difficult. And that was the greatest learning that I went through. Because when things are tough, you have to stand up and be counted, right? And Pakistan has no option but to reform. There is no option. No one. They will come, the Americans will tell us, oh, great, you are really strategically important. Oh, wow, you're such an important country. The EU will come and say the same. The Muslim countries will come and say, you are our brothers. But they are not going to pay you to give gas under cost to households and to not prevent theft. And they are not going to tell you, यार ये पेट्रोल हमारे से ऑयल फैसिलिटी ले लो और रियाद से सस्ती कीमत पे पेट्रोल दे दो लोगों को. ये नहीं करना लोगों ने. ये हो गया जो होना था. सो फिर क्या होगा? फिर हमें शिफ्ट चेंज करना पड़ेगा. बिकॉज 250 मिलियन लोग उनका मुल्क इम्प्लोड नहीं कर सकता. ये इट्स इम्पॉसिबल. ये नहीं हो सकता.
Now we've gotten a lot of questions from people already, so I'll start with that. Emman Nadeem is asking, what's your take on E&P and energy sector in Pakistan, keeping in view the regional developments in the energy sector?
I think I've pretty much covered that, right? I feel that the E&P sector it's jo hona tha, isko battle ye ho chuka hai. And I think that now with all these issues moving towards resolution, gas pricing, all these various policies, circular debt, how in both power and gas, we haven't quite got to reducing it, but I think that there's a realization that we can't keep accumulating it, right? And that has like a very, very big knock-on effect on the whole E&P sector. But the E&P sector that's one aspect of it, right? There's been a vast underinvestment in the E&P sector because of all of this, right? In the last sort of 5 years. And I think that needs to be looked at. I mean, just talking about E&P, right? I'm just remembering something. Isaac Dar wanted to do a secondary offering of OGDC at $2.50 a share. And it was stopped due to political considerations. And there was a stay order taken against it. And मुझे याद है, मुझे मोहम्मद जुबैर उस वक्त प्राइवेटाइजेशन के मिनिस्टर थे. ही टोल्ड मी कि हम रोड शो में बैठे हुए थे लंदन में, और मुझे व्हाट्सएप आया कि पेशावर हाई कोर्ट ने, शायद पेशावर में, पता नहीं पेशावर में कि इस्लामाबाद हाई कोर्ट ने स्टे दे दिया है ऑन दी. सो आई मीन, हाउ मच वुड वी गिव टू गेट $2.50 a share for OGDC today? So, but I think there'll be a re-rating of the sector.
It's actually continuation from this point, that what's your view on taking leverage and how much, especially when you have a strong conviction, like in the case of circular debt resolution?
So I think leverage was an interesting one, right? So I take a little bit of leverage, and contrary to what people, I hear all these rumors that मेरी leverage positions cut रही हैं और मुझे हमेशा लोगों के phone आते हैं. I take very little leverage in the market, right? So I take when I started this company, I had a rule that I'm never going to take more than 25% leverage. I think I take maybe, I'm probably at 30% now or something. So I think, yes, leverage is okay. But last year, leverage was a really easy call, right? Because dividend yields were 30-something%. And leverage was what, 24-25%. So that was a no-brainer, because the interest cost was being more than covered by the dividends, and the capital gain was free. And I remember Mansha Saab bought a big position from some outside shareholder of MCB at the bottom of the market. I think उसको उन्होंने शायद 120 या 112 रुपए में वो लिया. And I remember telling people कि यार उन्होंने 6 बिलियन रुपए के शेयर लिए, तो उनकी को borrowing cost तो होगी ना जो उन्होंने वो भरनी है, तो इतनी तो cover होगी ना. तो MCB was in my opinion in those days was a no-brainer, because the sponsor had gone and done this big trade in the market, right? So he would have given himself at least this much dividend to cover his cost of capital, right? But even today, if you look at it, you have companies that are yielding 20 early 20s, and interest rates are likely to come down. So I think that leveraging on these things is quite a very, it's like a quite a prudent thing to do. But overall, low 2x 4x 5x kind of काम यार मेरे में तो इस तरह की nerves नहीं है मेरे से, so I don't do that kind of stuff. So
I do remember hearing from you about this trade of higher dividend was compensating for interest rates last year. So certainly that was a great trade.
Yeah, so that was a great trade, right? That was like a really, really, really good trade too. And actually, the pioneer of that trade actually was Hussain Daud Saab when he bought Hupco back in the day. So he borrowed capital, bought Hupco, because Hupco's yield was covering the cost of capital, and the view was that interest rates are going to come down. And I remember, for me, the most savvy banker in Pakistan, Javed Iqbal, was involved in that transaction. And I remember that happened in I think 2010 or something, right? And that's exactly how it played out. They borrowed money. Us waqt the spread was like, मेरा मतलब है, उनका positive spread था, 2.5% का. Then interest rates came crashing down, and then it was a fantastic trade.
Imran is asking, what's your view on monetary easing? What time frame do you see for interest rates going down? And then his follow-up question is, why do cement companies don't pay dividends despite high profitability?
Okay. I think that I don't like to put time frames on things. It's very difficult. Someone can say 3 महीने में होगा, someone can say 4 महीने में होगा. I think it's very difficult. I think you need to look at broader directionality, right? And broader directionality is this, that inflation rates are coming down. I mean, I was hearing today that inflation for the month of April will be 18%. Somebody was telling me today. But regardless, whether it's 18 or it's 19 or it's 17, okay, we have to look at directionality, and the directionality is one way, is that the high base is kicking in, and if there's no oil shock, and even if there's an oil shock and they pass it on, they'll go up by a couple of percentage points, but overall the high base is coming in, and then things are going to start easing. So I mean, it's difficult for me to say 5% katega ya 7% katega ye December tak katega ye kab, but overall you need to zoom out a little bit and look at the directionality, and the directionality is towards a downward curve, right? And I think that's the view. The second part was on cement companies. I think that's because it's a highly cyclical business, is very capital intensive. I think companies kind of shy away from paying out dividends. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to talk about companies in general. I can talk about Maple Leaf, and the view at Maple Leaf is very different. I think that because we've had problems in the past with leverage, so we're quite prudent as far as leveraging is concerned. So always when we go into an expansion cycle, our view is कि यार leverage को जल्दी घटाओ. But देखिए हमने buyback किया हमने एक और कंपनी में, कंपेटिटर में, एक आई थिंक एट वेरी वेरी रीजनेबल प्राइस हमने शेयर्स खरीदे हैं फॉर अ लॉन्ग टर्म इन्वेस्टमेंट. सो आवर फोकस इज ऑन being financially prudent whilst providing capital growth. We also need to understand in terms of companies, and this is a point that systems is like a company like that, right? Systems gives you 30% dollar growth. Why do I want a dividend? I don't want a dividend. I want that growth. Why would I tell them to take money that can be used for growth and give it to me? I don't want that money. Great companies abroad give growth. If Lucky Cement doesn't give you 100% payout, why do you want 100% payout? Look at where Lucky Cement was 20 years ago. Single site operator with 2 kilns, and look at what it is today. A behemoth conglomerate, right? So that you have to look at that growth. So मेरा focus, मुझे नहीं फर्क पड़ता dividend दें ना दें कंपनी. मैं dividend को frankly speaking नहीं देखता. It's an interesting play when the yields are high. It's a really interesting play then because the yields come down and then you get a massive capital gain. But if companies are giving me good capital growth, and cement companies across the board have given really, really good capital growth, I think that I would be personally, I think that that's how you have to look at it. You have to look at it slightly bit more. It's a little bit more nuanced than just saying कि company pay out. I think.
National Bank Funds is asking that you think cement valuations are low, but why didn't Maple Leaf complete its buyback?
I don't. I think Maple Leaf is. I have to be careful how I answer this. I think that Maple Leaf is looking at growth opportunities.
Got it. Got it.
So we can't do everything, right? And we'll do one or the other, right? And obviously, if we can't come across those growth opportunities, it'll happen at there'll be some payout in the future.
Imran is asking that the sales are stagnant for cement sector. Do you see that changing soon?
Yeah, I do. I think just by virtue of interest rates coming down, there'll be more space as far as the fiscal position of the government is concerned, because interest expenses will start coming down and that will start unlocking some capital. And once that capital starts coming out, I think things will start moving forward. I think the interest rate is going to be a big driver as far as sales are concerned.
Why are we not able to convince the IMF to see that clearing piled up circular debt with dividends is almost budget neutral? And he's also asking that why can't IMF agree that monetary easing is essential to ease pressure on the fiscal side, because demand can stay controlled to an extent by import controls?
I don't know. I don't speak for the IMF. I wish I did, but I don't. I think that as far as the dividend plug-in scheme is concerned, I think we looked at it many times, made sense to us. I think possibly I think eventually here's what I think the problem is. When the last program, Ali, you recall, we spoke about this a lot, right? When this standby agreement wasn't happening, I was of the view कि हो जाएगी. और मेरा view था कि वो delay इसलिए हुई थी because they wanted to see the budget. There is a very big trust gap. Imagine that you've gone and you borrowed money from a bank and you're like a bad customer. आप 98th day पे payment करते हैं, आपके हमेशा problems. We're like that as far as the IMF is concerned, right? So our ability to get favor from them is limited. And we have to rebuild that confidence over the course of this program, right? So I think that उस वक्त मुझे था कि ये budget देखना चाहते हैं. अब ये देखना चाहते हैं कि they don't want to allow the dividend plowback scheme as a mechanism to not reform. So they are going to say कि यार reform इनसे पहले इनको डंडे मार के reform करवाओ. जब ये चोरी और ये प्राइवेटाइज जो भी करने हैं, इनको आउटसोर्स करना है, प्राइवेटाइजेशन करनी है, चोरी खत्म करनी है, बोर्ड जो भी करने हैं, इनको पहले इनको सीधा करो. जब ये सीधा हो गया, then allow them to do this. प्रॉब्लम ये है कि मेरा ख्याल है, ये मेरी परसेप्शन है कि अगर इन्होंने अभी डिविडेंड प्लाउबैक स्कीम इनसे फॉरन करवा दी तो इन्होंने कहना फिर ये चौड़े होकर बैठ जाएंगे और कहेंगे अब तो कुछ नहीं करने की जरूरत, सब कुछ सॉल्व हो. So I understand the logic. I understand despite the unpopularity of the way the IMF is dealing with Pakistan, अगर मैं IMF होता मैं भी बिल्कुल ऐसे ही. मैं कहता इनको कैरेट एंड स्टिक, इनको 10 दफा डंडा मारो फिर एक कैरेट दे दो, फिर 10 दफा डंडा मारो फिर एक कैरेट दे दो, बिकॉज ये बात करके मुकर जाते हैं. यार हमने भी तो, मेरा मतलब है हमाकत की है ना प्रोग्राम के साथ, जो हमने पिछले प्रोग्राम में किया. I mean, I don't want to get into it, but it's absolutely preposterous what we did with the last book, right? So, and then we've done this effort to derail the program, और कोई खत लिख रहा है, कोई ये कर रहा है, मतलब इस तरह नहीं चलता है.
I totally agree. And then you speak with some of those people who influence IMF. I speak with them. We speak with people in Saudi Arabia and people in the government level. So I think and IMF has also publicly said it now, that essentially that all our friends and all our sources of capital, whether it's Saudi, whether it's IMF, whether it's US, whether it's China, they all want to see effort from Pakistan's side on doing reforms. They want to see a commitment from Pakistan government to do difficult political decisions. So which include, monetary policy, which includes privatization, which includes the other reform which Waleed is talking about. And I think, Waleed, your point throughout the discussion has been that all of that is good for us, because that will allow us to take those decisions which are necessary for long-term survival. And if we do that, then equities will go up long-term. And that's what the gains which we are looking for, not just the short-term gains which we want over the next 3 months or 6 months. There are a couple of questions more, and we are running out of time, so I'll just be quick. Fazil is asking, could you provide some insight into refinery sector amidst expansions and deregulation?
Look, I think that deregulation is something that needs to happen, right? I mean, it's just, and you know, you look at this deregulation. This is an interesting one. We were talking about it yesterday with my team. What is the deregulation क्यों नहीं करना चाहते लोग? ये इसलिए नहीं करना चाहते because वो एक freight equalization charge लोग pay करते हैं. But if this had been a deregulated market to begin with, what would have happened? You would have had enough capacity and enough pipeline capacity in the north so that people would not be worse off. अभी तो ये रीजन है ना कि इट्स अ पॉलिटिकल रीजन कि जी कराची वगैरह और जो रिफाइनरीज के इर्द गिर्द वाले इलाके हैं उधर प्राइस बड़ी कम होगी कंपेयर टू लाइक गिलगित बल्तिस्तान, राइट? एंड दैट दे विल बी एट अ डिसएडवांटेज, एंड दिस इज द कॉन्सिक्वेंस ऑफ रेगुलेशन that people have decided that why is there only one refinery in the north, why are there not others, you know, because this is because so deregulation has to happen. I think it will happen. It's always a little bit painful to begin with, but then in the long term, investment, you know, unlocks and it becomes, everything starts working better, right? So that's, I think, on the deregulation. As far as on the expansion side is concerned, look, it has to happen. The state of the refineries is abysmal. There needs to be better quality of fuel in the country. We're just literally killing ourselves with this fuel. So we have to get our act together as far as this thing is concerned. And look, they have the money to do it. There's enough money in the pipeline to do this. So
when refineries were trading below scrap value, and you were saying that, you know, market is pricing in that these will be shut down, you were saying that's not possible. That
अभी भी है. मैं नाम नहीं लेना चाहता, but आपको पता है which refinery I'm alluding to, cash के नीचे trade कर रही है.
There are a lot of questions. Again, I'm just now picking up the ones which I think are more relevant.
If you need to go on, I'm happy to.
Oh, great. Okay. Some questions on cement. Adil Khan is asking, do you think acquiring other companies like Garibwal, Dandort, Fecto is a viable strategy for growth in the cement industry? And his second question is, will Flying Cement's new line pose a threat to the sector when demand is low?
I think, look, low demand is something that's a threat to the sector in any case, right? But as far as the stock market perspective is concerned, I mean, these companies, I think you sent this chart, what are they trading? $25-30 a ton? Yeah, $25-30 a ton का तो scrap value है ना इन कंपनियों की. तो क्या मेरा मतलब कितनी threat होगी वो, क्या इससे नीचे क्या जाएंगी? तो मेरा opinion ये है कि yes, demand needs to pick up. Of course, it's not something that we like to see where things are. Is acquisition a strategy? Yes, for sure, 1000%. It's an absolutely a strategy. But you know that, and we've seen it executed very, very successfully by Bestway. They've done 2 acquisitions. So they did Mustaqim and then they did Lafarge, and we've seen them catch up to Lucky Cement and become, I don't know which one's bigger. Depends who you ask, right? You ask Lucky, they say way bigger. You ask Bestway, they say way bigger, but they're about the same size, right? So the Bestway has been incredibly successful in this strategy, right? And I think I think M&A activity is a good thing all over the world. People have to have the heart to pay people a fair value for their company. अब आप distressed time पे जाके किसी को distressed valuation देंगे तो वो आपको नहीं बेचेगा. You have to give just to give you an indication, Lafarge was bought at I could be wrong by like a couple of percentage points, but I think it was at $134 a ton. That was when Lafarge was.
So the next question is from a colleague of yours from Maple Leaf Cement, and Abdul Hasib is asking that PSX stock prices are at top now. What you think are factors behind this development and how cement sector has contributed in it? I think you said that actually the prices can go much higher. I think that's the point which you were saying. Yeah. But second is, so Hasib, I don't think Waleed thinks that the prices are already too high. And secondly, he's asking how much growth do you see in cement exports going forward?
Look, the big game changer for cement exports is in the north. I mean, look, in the south, exports is like a marginal cost game, right? It's like you're competing with all over the world, and it's really like you're selling at like very little contribution margin, right? So I don't, and as far as Maple Leaf is concerned, we can't do that. So I don't really look at that. The big elephant in the room is India trade. Um, I mean, your guess is as good as mine. I think if Pakistan aspires to become it aspires, what it had aspirations to become 70 odd years ago in 1947, we have to start trading with the region. So we've just signed MOUs today with Iran for $10 billion trade. We have to start trading with the region. And I think as far as the cement sector is concerned, that is a big opportunity. It is not a threat. This region, Ali, I'll give you. I'll just take a minute to. I was on a train from London to Paris one day, and I was waiting for my train, and I was seeing thousands of people coming and going in commerce and trade. It's mind blowing, right? तो मेरा मतलब है यार, अगर वो लोग आपस में ट्रेड कर सकते हैं, पता नहीं कितने लाखों लोग मरे in wars between France and England, right, for centuries, and then France and Germany. If this region,
culturally they don't like each other, but they still
they're totally different. Like a Frenchman and an Englishman could not be more different, and a German to बिल्कुल ही फर्क होती है, right? And there's trade, and there's commerce, and there's exchange of people and goods. And
on this point, Ali,
I think if the region has to go to where the region has to go, trade has to happen, right? And that's
specifically on cement. There's a follow-up question that can Pakistani cement, is it price? Can it be sold to India from a pricing perspective?
Yeah, for sure. हम बेचते थे एक जमाने के अंदर मेपल लीफ बाय ट्रेन हम सीमेंट बेचते थे इंडिया में, और हम पेटकोक खरीदते थे रिलायंस से. सो सीमेंट जाता था ट्रेन में, और उसी ट्रेन में, हाउ एफिशिएंट इज दैट यार? It's the highly efficient model.
Arsalan Sumar was asking that, do you think that the valuations can catch up to the previous valuations, given the fact that inflation might be high and interest rate might not go back to the same level as they were in the past?
No, I don't think. I think that when the high base kicks in, and if we follow the path of reform, anything and everything is possible. अगर हमने इसमें भी डंडी मारना शुरू कर दी, जो हम हर दफा करते हैं कि नहीं चले थोड़ा सा जी इनको जरा फ्री में दे दें, इनको जरा इसको जरा छूट दे दें, इनको जरा ट्रेडर्स को ना लाएं, इसको छोड़ दो, इसको यहाँ से घुमा के ऐसे, फिर नहीं होगा. बट मेरा नहीं ख्याल है उसकी गुंजाइश है. तो मेरा ख्याल है ये, मैं अरसलान से रिस्पेक्टफुली डिसएग्री करता हूँ. आई थिंक इन्फ्लेशन भी नीचे आएगी, एंड आई थिंक वैल्यूएशंस भी ऊपर.
And Arsalan has a follow-up question. Then he's really good at, like, he also is a big proponent of increasing retail investor base in Pakistan, promoting financial literacy. He's asking for your suggestions on what can be done around this.
I think people need to talk. I told you, Ali, when we met like what, a week, 10 days ago, when you were over at my place, and we were talking, and I have made it like my. I don't want to be on social media. I don't want to be on Twitter and stuff. I don't like it, but I'm going to. इधर तो खैर चलता ही नहीं. तो मैं जब I'm going to talk about these things, and that's why I'm talking to you. I've done this with other people. I'm going to do like a podcast with someone who's very critical of the situation in Pakistan, and that's going to be like a fun, like little boxing match we're going to have. I think bringing people in and talking and giving people confidence, and I think, look, financial literacy is really, really important, and people need to understand that financial literacy is going to be good for them. They're going to make a lot of money in the process, right? And I think that's just by talking and educating and whatever I can do. Listen, I love talking about this stuff, as you can tell. Like I'm very passionate about
it. And that's exactly why we reached out to you, because your performance and your experience is inspirational for others as well. And I think you telling people in your circles about what what your experience has been is a great case study for others to attract others. There are two big questions, and then there are many other questions, but there are two really big and interesting questions which I do want, and I do want to take your time for those. Nihal is asking, what's your investment style? Do you identify as deep value on balance sheet, low PE, cash flows, some other moat around the business, or is there some other style which you follow? And I'll club another question which is similarly very important, which Hamza is asking, Hamza Tariq is asking, and he's saying, what is your thought process when it comes to analyzing a company? What sets a great company apart from a good company? I think these are really important questions.
Yeah, those are really interesting questions, right? So I think I don't think I have like I think I'm quite opportunistic, right, in the way that I invest. And I have become more so. I was a little bit more dogmatic when I started this business, right? And it's been, of course, it's been like a big learning curve for me because I'm not from this background. And frankly speaking, my family's not at all got this background. कुछ लोग तो अभी भी समझते हैं पता नहीं काम शाम तो करता नहीं है ऐसे ही बस बोलता रहता है कभी कुछ दिखा देता है कभी कुछ दिखा देता है. So I think that it's been a very big learning curve for me over the last. I've been trading in the market since 2008, right? So it's been like what, 16 years. It's been a very interesting sort of journey, and I've learned a lot. And I remember, I've been in this market. I think I bought OGDC for like 28 rupees or something when the sorry, my batteries. So I remember buying OGDC like super cheap and then selling it at like double the value and thinking that I was like a really big genius, right? So I think that it's been so I've become more opportunistic over time. But I think what we try to identify is like I think sponsors are really, really important in Pakistan, especially because you have companies that are like very, very most families own like 51%. So you have to look at like sponsors, and quality of sponsors is really, really important, right? And I'll give you like, I don't want to name names, but there was a time where I had a big position. There were two companies, similar sectors. I had a big position in one, and I had a not so big position in the other one. And then the one where I had a smaller position, the quality of sponsor was much better, and we did really, really well. And in the other one, we were very lucky to not get burnt and get out, right? So I think that I think that
you don't want to name those companies, because I think that can be a good example of a case study actually. I could guess which two companies.
Can you guess?
Of course.
Go on then.
Technology sector, right?
Yeah. Okay. So there were systems and TRG, right?
Yes.
And I think that we started buying T-Systems when it was like 100 rupees a share, or maybe even under 100 rupees. And I remember that was the first time I spoke to Asif Peer, and I was like really, really, really impressed. And I know Azaz Sheikh, and I know Azaz Hussain, and I know members of the board. And I was like, it had the right governance in place and that. But TRG was like this trailblazer, right? And then you've seen what's happened with that, with sponsors fighting and all the and all the rest of it. I mean, it should be a 400 rupee company, but it's not. It's like languishing at like 70 or whatever. So I think that that's really, really important. And then I think that I have the advantage of having been an entrepreneur for most of my life and coming from that sort of background. So I'm able to look at opportunities from that. I can put on my entrepreneurial hat quite easily and look at opportunities. So I don't think there's like a fixed strategy as such. I think I just sort of like vacillate between various things that I look at in order to sort of make up my mind about, okay, yes, like this is something that we'd like to go for. But I think that overriding, I think that quality of management and quality of sponsors is like a really, really important aspect, especially in these emerging and frontier markets. I think it's really important.
Thank you. So the last question, and I know we have gotten over time of the time which you gave us, and then I'm skipping some questions which are like, would Maple buy Pioneer, and some other stock specific questions, just because you mentioned that perhaps this is not it's a public forum for discussing specific stocks. I'm clubbing two questions. One is from Awais Qureshi, and he's asking, how do you see investment in the mining sector of Pakistan? There's a lot of commitment coming from Saudi, Barrick, Cheniot. So how do you see the mining sector? And Naveed Elahi is asking, what's the most important reform which you think Pakistan needs to take, and what is the date which you have in mind for that reform? So what's the biggest reform which Pakistan should take or will take, or you think what makes you most happy about, like the prospect that if they can change this thing, this can really help Pakistan? And secondly, any views on the mining sector?
Look, I know from the Saudi side that they're really keen as far as the mining sector is concerned. And I think that the world is like kind of noticing what's happening over there. I'm not particularly involved in the sector as such. I know Lucky has started and has taken like a bet on this and has gone in. I think perhaps Liberty as well. I'm not entirely sure. But I think out of the local groups, they're probably sort of further ahead of anyone else. And then obviously you've had the big success in Thar coal, right? Like that is a success story by all sort of if you look at it sort of across the board. I think people would agree. So I think that it's a big sector in the sense that it requires a lot of money and know-how and things like that. So I think that these foreigners coming in, it's going to open up the sector a lot, and I think that it's an interesting and a space to watch. I don't know enough about it really to comment on it as such, but I do know that the interest is there, and I think the interest is very real. So I think that it's something that I'm trying to keep an eye on, frankly. And I know that the SIFC is certainly very bullish. And the army chief personally, I think his two favorite sectors are like agriculture and mining. And I know this like from the horse's mouth. I think that he's very sort of bullish on both of these things. So I think it's an important one. It's an important one to look at. Insofar as what is the reform? I think that reducing the footprint of the government is the most important reform, and that kind of like ties in with many other minor reforms, right? Not minor, but smaller subsets of reforms. Like, so for example, like that would entail that this deregulation of petroleum pricing has to take place, where the government, कौन सा मुल्क है यार जहाँ पे government वजीर खजाना टीवी पे आके अनाउंस करते हैं कि हमने 10 रुपए पेट्रोल की कीमत बढ़ा दी है. Where does this happen? I've never seen it. I mean, I've never seen it anywhere. So this sort of stuff, and that ties in with all the other sort of SOE related stuff, right? With circular debt, gas and power, getting rid of these discos, getting rid of PIA, doing something with the steel mill. So I think the all-encompassing view on that is that the footprint of the government has to be reduced. And I think the government has to be a collector of taxes and a regulator, and then it should be spending that tax money on the welfare and development of the country, right? So reducing their footprint in business and increasing their footprint on the welfare and on the taxation side. I think this is the rejigging of the mindset of the government. I think that's the most important reform. And I think that, look, that realization is there. I think that that's very much there. I think that I'm fingers crossed. I'm quite optimistic about this.
Thank you so much for your time and for that
My pleasure.
Optimistic message, and also for your investments in Pakistan, and of course your support for for us and for working with KTrade. So
thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity. It's been great fun.
The recording of this will be available online, and people are already messaging me for it, so I'm sure it will be very popular. Thank you, Waleed. Have a lovely day.
Thank you everyone. Thanks for doing it. Thank you.